All right, what's going on, you guys? Brian here, and this is my Impact Wrestling recap for last night's episode. Of course, this last night's episode featured the fallout from this past Sunday night's Rebellion event that featured two new champions crowned in a new world champion, Brian Cage, and new Impact Tag Team champions in Santana and Ortiz, LAX, who defeated Pentagon Jr. and Phoenix in Full Metal Mayhem. And, of course, Brian Cage defeated Johnny Impact to become the new Impact World Champion. And speaking of that, we started off Impact Wrestling last night with a promo from Unbreakable Michael Elgin, who made an emphatic statement this past Sunday at Rebellion, laying waste to Brian Cage after Cage won the world title. Last night, Elgin made it very clear that what his intentions were, that he came to Impact Wrestling to become world champion. He would then be interrupted by Johnny Impact, the former champion, and Johnny made it clear that that Elgin obviously doesn't know how things work around there, that since Johnny is the former champion, he has a rematch clause, so Elgin would have to wait his turn. Then here comes Conan, who has made amends with Pentagon Jr. and has became his advisor, his whatever you want to call him, and he basically told both Elgin and Johnny Impact that they would have to wait their turn because Pentagon wanted to get back in the title picture, and he should be the #1 contender. So basically, this led to Elgin putting his hands on Conan, grabbing Conan. Pentagon would come out, and him and Elgin would go at it. Then Johnny Impact would hit a cheap shot on Michael Elgin when security came out and was holding all three guys back. Then, even though Johnny wasn't even fighting, it was Elgin and Pentagon that they were trying to separate, but, of course, all three guys were in the ring at the same time. But Elgin would then lay waste to the security that were left in the ring, and that was pretty much it for this segment. Basically, this would lead to the main event being a triple threat #1 contenders match for the world title. Pentagon Jr., Johnny Impact, and Michael Elgin in the main event, and I'll get into that in just a moment. They did address Brian Cage, who suffered an injury at Rebellion when he took a Spanish fly from Johnny Impact off the ramp onto the floor, and suffered an injury to his back that led to him not having a feeling in his right leg and in part of his left. But he still continued the match even though he was in pain. He was then rushed to the emergency room. Next week we'll find out more details. They said they're going to provide an update on Cage's condition as far as whether or not, when he'll be back. So that'll be interesting to see what the update is as far as that is concerned. The opening match of last night's episode was Ace Austin taking on Petey Williams. This has been a feud that's been brewing for, I think, a good couple of weeks now. Ace Austin, of course, picked up a big victory on Sunday at Rebellion, winning a 6-pack scramble, actually defeating Petey in that matchup. This was a good match between these two to start off the show. A lot of back and forth, a very solid pace as far as the work rate is concerned. Ace Austin picked up the win with the fold. He defeated Petey Williams and obviously cementing his name in the X Division, maybe gaining a future shot at the X Division Championship, currently held by Rich Swann. But Ace Austin, a very impressive individual, and as he scored a big victory last night on Impact over Petey Williams. So I'm expecting some big things for Ace Austin. Hopefully we'll see in the near future. They did have a couple of promos as far as to set up matches for next week. One of which was involving the returning Rob Van Dam, who came out, talked about how a lot of the superstars in the locker room who probably grew up watching him on TV started emulating him, started using some of his moves, and that he came to Impact Wrestling to show that there's only one Rob Van Dam. He would then be interrupted by Ethan Page, and basically this would lead to a match being set up for next week where Rob Van Dam said that obviously he wanted Ethan Page wanted him to kick his butt. He would then hit a Van Daminator on Ethan Page with a chair, and that was pretty much it. So next week it will be Ethan Page versus Rob Van Dam in a very huge matchup set for next week. We also heard from OVE, Sami Callihan, David J. Christ, and Madman Fulton. They made a challenge to Rich Swann to find 3 partners for a 4-on-4 8-man tag team OVE rules match. Rich Swann would get help from, or would acquire the services of Tommy Dreamer, who told Rich he has his back, Willie Mack, who Rich Swann said will always have his back, and they thought Scarlett Bordeaux was volunteering to be the 4th person, but she has volunteered the services of Falaba. So next week there will be an 8-man OVE rules match as OVE takes on Falaba, Willie Mack, Tommy Dreamer, and the X Division champion Rich Swann. So that'll be interesting to see what happens in that one next week. Also, during the this happened after the Ethan Page and Rob Van Dam segment. They had a backstage thing where Josh Alexander was yelling at Ethan Page for not focusing on having the North being dominant in the tag division, that he had to go out and issue a challenge to RVD. And then Moose would come in and say that, Ethan doesn't have to pull double duty, that him and Josh Alexander will take care of LAX. So next week, sorry guys. So next week it will be LAX, the new Impact World Tag Team Champions, versus Josh Alexander of the North and Moose. So that's a huge matchup set for next week. We also saw on last night's episode Rosemary taking on Kiera Hogan. This one ended in a no contest because Sue Young and the Undead Brides, they came out and attacked Rosemary, and then Sue Young would free the Undead Maid of Honor, or the Undead Bride, or the Undead Maid of Honor, who Rosemary has held captive and on a chain for the last couple of weeks. Basically, Sue Young and the Undead Bride would leave Rosemary laying. Kiera Hogan looked like she was going to help Rosemary, but then backed off. So Rosemary's going to be looking for revenge on Kiera Hogan for not helping her. I don't blame Kiera in a way because, the last time, she helped out Allie, who was with Impact Wrestling. Now she's with AEW. But that whole storyline they had going where, Kiera was helping out Allie, and then she wanted to help Rosemary out, but Rosemary at first didn't want her help. So I don't blame Kiera Hogan in that sense of, not helping Rosemary because, she tried offering her help many times before, but Rosemary would rather fight on her own than have backup. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that whole storyline. And it also continues Su Yung and Rosemary's feud they have going. So that's another thing, another positive for that situation. We saw Eddie Edwards in action against Phoenix. This one was actually a really good matchup as well. The only strange part about it was that Killer Cross would come out near the middle of the match and basically just stood on the ramp staring at the ring. Eddie Edwards caught sight of him. Killer Cross would be the reason why Eddie lost this matchup. He would grab Kenny and looked like he was going to give it to Eddie Edwards, but then held on to it and wouldn't let go. This would end up costing, like I said, Eddie to lose this match. Phoenix hitting the Muscle Buster driver to pick up the victory in this one. So what is going on there with Killer Cross, and why did he get involved with Eddie Edwards in Eddie Edwards' match? So we'll have to wait and see what happens next week. Which brings us to the main event. Michael Elgin, Johnny Impact, Pentagon Jr. for the #1 contender spot to the World Championship. This one was a really good match with the right person winning this one, and it was Michael Elgin who would score the win over Johnny Impact. So he pinned the former world champion and the man who had claims to be the #1 contender. So Elgin picked up the victory with the sit-out powerbomb. Pentagon was injured in this matchup, from the looks of it. At least that's from what I saw. He looked like he was injured. So hopefully they get an update on Pentagon next week. But overall, it was a really good match. The only thing that I found surprising is that they mentioned at the last Impact Wrestling event, which was a Twitch exclusive, was United We Stand last month, was that Johnny Impact won a Ultimate X match to earn a future opportunity at the world title anytime he wishes. So obviously, regardless of whether or not he lost, he still has a future opportunity at the world title in his back pocket. So Elgin won last night on Impact, which I thought was the right move, but Johnny Impact will still be around that world title picture. So, but like I said, that'll be interesting to see how the whole world title situation ends up, whether or not Brian Cage will be able to compete, and when he'll be able to return to the ring to face Elgin with the world title on the line. So last night's episode I thought was really good. It did set up a lot of things for next week. They did mention their new streaming service, Impact Plus. They announced this Sunday on Impact Plus exclusively will be Code Red. And then they mentioned an event coming up next month that will feature the return of the Great Muta. So that'll be interesting. But overall, last night's episode of Impact I thought was really good. Featured a lot of fallout from Rebellion and featured a lot of good things set up for next week. So with that in mind, if you guys watched last night's episode of Impact Wrestling, let me know what you guys thought of it in the comments below. This has been my Impact Wrestling recap. As always, I am Brian, and thank you for watching.